Mr. Chris Trossard, how are we, sir?
We are so good, Mr. Gordon. How about
So
you?
good. We are dying. We are melting here.
That's what
It's
I hear.
34 degrees
We got the
in
same
theory.
going on here in Toronto. So
Yeah,
it's you're
yeah.
not you're
We just
not.
like complaining about it,
Yeah,
Chris,
you can probably
right?
stop. We in Canada whine about the weather all the time, but that's we're
Good.
allowed. We're allowed.
I knew we'd get along. Right, okay. We're gonna cut. We haven't spoken for a while because it's kind of like it's been sort of really meh type
Yeah,
news, hasn't it?
quite
It's
out
been
there.
like
News wise, yeah.
news-wise, it's like I guess 3-4 years ago when it jumped on said right as a catalyst, let's go. But I think it's been a little bit tiresome of late. But until about a week ago, so we're going to talk today about Sprott, what that raise or ability to raise is done for everyone, positive or negative. We're going to talk about there's some other raises going on. We're seeing a lot of money being raised in the market, and
Hmm.
the mood is good, but they are advanced development stories typically
Yeah, it's
that
been
we're
it's been tough otherwise, I gotta
tough
say.
otherwise. And we're going to talk about, if you can't raise money, maybe you go and do a bit of M&A, maybe. But let's talk about that too. So,
Fill your time. Yeah.
where do you want to start? Split?
Well,
Should we start there?
start with Spud. Yeah, that was interesting.
Okay.
They picked up
Not
what
least of all, our pronunciation of those letters. Split
the
versus
Sprott
Sprott.
Physical Uranium Trust.
Let's go with that. Yeah. Okay. What's your takeaway?
Well, I mean, they obviously see that the market's that it's time. I mean, they're watching this closer than anybody, I guess, from a day-to-day basis, and they picked up. They went out for 100 million. They picked up 200 million almost immediately, which demonstrates the interest right now in the space, I guess, from the funds and whomever is throwing money at these things. And then they immediately went in and started buying again on the spot, so at spot price, so at market, so it things start ticking up again in that regard. So they'll be soaking up whatever's sitting around on the spot market, and we'll probably see. Well, we're seeing it get a little tighter between the spot and the long term, because the long term is still sitting at 80. I think today we'll find out what the end of June is bringing in terms of the long term, but certainly we're seeing the spot price now come back up. I mean, it's been swinging high, swinging low. Now it's going to be coming back up to get a little closer to the long term market.
Well, it had certainly had an immediate response. I think it was up eight nine
Oh, yeah.
percent off the back of that. As well, as you say, is it sustainable? And is that enough in itself to
Well, it is if
move
it's
the
soaked up
market?
whatever material is sitting on the spot market. So they're tightening that up. Again, what it does to the long term market is nothing. Really, right? I mean, it's the two are independent of each other in terms of, well, the spot market actually is not a forward indication of what's going on underneath it. But we'll see what again, we'll see what happens to the long term price today, and how it's being affected. But I don't believe that the spot market jumping around as it does necessarily impacts directly the long term market, which is what is really drives the market.
So obviously, look, very little traded this year up until this point. Do you think that the spurt doing further accumulation will trigger any kind of short squeezes in the space? I'm thinking or
Uh,
something in Paladin.
yeah, we might. I mean, now that the price is back up, we might see some more coming back on, because we know that a lot of the purchasing that was done at the lower price was really done in speculation. So if the price comes up, we might see some of that material come back out. But it's all good. Again, the challenge is the market watches the spot price. This particular transaction is going to make the spot price move, which it has and will continue to in the short run. And yeah, things will follow it. So I guess from an equity standpoint, it's a good thing. Well, again, we've also been watching equities continue to rise over the last few months. So I mean, not drastically like we sometimes see, but we've certainly seen them all edging up over the last 10, 12 weeks.
Which is more than they've done for the rest of the year, right?
Oh,
So
absolutely. Yeah,
is,
yeah.
is that
No,
why
the
is
rest.
that why you're struggling to sound enthusiastic about it?
Um, well, yeah, somewhat. Well, it just beats the hell out of you after a while. So you always be cautious. But yeah, it's been moving slowly, I guess, which is interesting because it's I guess that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. It's when things start spiking up and down you know that there's either better news or worse news coming after the fact. But the fact that it all now seems to be moving in a very general and calm fashion is a good thing, I think.
Well, I think it's interesting to see how companies have reacted, during this kind of period of malaise, and even with this Sprott news, which I think maybe a couple of years ago would have generated a whole buzz and excitement around it, and great expectation as usual.
But it did a few years ago.
It did. That's what I'm saying. It would,
Yeah.
it would have back then, but I don't necessarily think it was. I don't necessarily think it did. It did that now. I guess times are different. They're different
No, not in
size.
the same way. I don't think
Yeah,
equities didn't all of a sudden go through the roof, and I don't think that's
yeah.
what we expect to see. You're right.
I think there's a slow maturing at, I guess, expectation in the marketplace. I think have we battered everyone long enough now for them to go, well, let's see. I'm cautiously optimistic. Is that the tone?
That works. That works for me.
That works for me as well. Always has done.
Yeah.
That way you can't be disappointed. But I say, sort of, I'm interested to see how the companies have reacted. I think one of the companies that, say one of my favorites is Brandon Monroe's Bannerman Energy. They've just announced that they're going to raise $85 million Aussie. I'd be surprised if they didn't obviously end up with more. That's the conservative nature of their announcements typically. As they move through to this kind of feed process, quite frankly, they are more advanced than people realize. And what we need is stories like that to actually get into production.
I think so. And I think, and to your point, people don't announce things like that unless they actually know they've got it in the bag for the most part. So, to see that kind of that money coming back into a story like that is really good news.
It's fantastic
for everybody.
It's fantastic. Yeah, we definitely expected it recently with gold and silver companies, raising, there's kind of, what would that be? Plus 100 million type deals. I expect to see that, but uranium, I haven't seen that for a while.
No, and I think to see two of them in a week or two is really good news. I mean, somebody knows something, and again, we're dealing in a market where nobody knows anything. So, to see some of the folks that those cues and those clues, like Sprott stepping in like they did, like a financing such as Bannerman's being filled. That's all good. That means
that's all good.
Yeah.
And was it Phil Williams, IsoEnergy as well, $50 million a couple of weeks earlier.
Did a big deal. Yeah.
We like it. We like it. It's all going well. It's all going well. Now,
it is.
We talked about some of the ways that companies behave, and what we've seen is a bunch of mergers. I think some better than others. So where do you want to go?
Smaller, it's been smaller stuff. I know in the last couple of weeks we've seen 3, and I mean in the last 20 years we've seen none. So but these are the smaller ones as well. You could compare them to something like the Paladin Fission deal, which is a year old now, but they last week announced that they've switched up CEOs, which is interesting because
hallelujah.
That may signal a bit of a pivot there because they're getting into more of an operational mode. Somebody in charge who I think he was out of Rio Tinto, and is really his experience is more deeply in mine building operations.
I think that's great news.
Yeah,
great news. Ian, I think for me, had kind of gone absent without leave, quite frankly. And given some of the first mover advantage type optionality they had, I don't think they did take advantage of it. The Fission deal was one of the most positive things that they did. You can take your view on what you think that does for Fission, what it does for Paladin. But
well, Fission needed a development partner, right?
They needed a development partner.
They were kind of treading water for too long. And gave Paladin some optionality. I think while the uranium stocks were soft and while the price was soft, so they probably got it at a good time in the market. I don't think it's I don't think they're necessarily going to start putting shovels in the ground tomorrow, but but it gives them that asset,
right?
Their base a bit.
I don't know. I kind of stopped paying attention to Paladin a while ago, but maybe I should look back in. Um, next one, Nexus and Basin Nexus uranium and Basin uranium.
Well,
Small.
that's a little one. Now, that one came out last week. That was,
Yeah,
and again, I think it's as much as it's you look at Sprott, or you look at Bannerman, or a development company, or an ISO raising money. We see money coming at that level. It's still very, very difficult for a lot of the juniors
yeah,
to continuously put the stories together, put the money together.
yeah,
So yeah, there was Nexus Uranium and Basin Uranium, and they're both very small market cap
yeah.
companies, but they've got some uranium assets, and I think they're just trying to get some focus back on it, and strap a couple of. I mean, I don't want to necessarily opinion on the deal itself, but
Shall
you
I do
got to
it
do
for
what you
you?
got to do, right? I mean, you can't,
Well,
as I say,
expect.
it's so
Mm,
expensive to
it,
do what they're
it,
doing.
yeah,
You
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 need to find a model, Chris, and like we've talked about it. With certainly with your model with at Pure Point, where you get this stuff financed for you. But I think expect Nexus uranium and Basin uranium to get taken out soon, because I don't think, as one CEO said to me, when you kind of merge two $100 million companies together, you end up with one $100 million company.
I think that was me.
And right, and I think not that these guys are anywhere near 100 million, but I think they will find it not that much easier, because nothing's really changed. You might have saved a
No,
small
I think
amount
they're
of
they're also
overhead.
spinning out a gold asset, but so they're kind of
Ah,
getting more focus. I guess what they're as a small exploration company. Yeah, like I say, it's tough. It's an expensive game, and you can't raise nearly enough money at those levels of market cap and price to do anything meaningful, to find anything, let alone turn it into a resource. So uh, yeah,
I I am not so
but I do
sure this is
sometimes
going to
wonder
do
about these
anything.
mergers
Yeah,
uh, because there's cheaper ways to do what they're trying to do. They're just trying to put assets together and create
yeah.
a more a bigger base to work from, right? There's cheaper ways to do it than merging two
Such
public
as,
companies.
go on then. Like what?
Well, roll one of the assets into the other one, and then you see that. But you've got investors, and you've got probably people at the helm who are sitting on a lot of shares of one, and you're going to. That's when you start getting into a weird negotiation. Certainly, if really what you're trying to do is build a bigger company with bigger base and manage your capital property, you would just have one company buy the assets of the other. Then you've got, which is a simpler deal than trying to merge two public companies, and then you got a shell you can do something else with. But it's not cheap to put two companies together, particularly relative to the size of these companies.
Well, I don't expect much to happen
No,
with
no.
that. I think one which I do think was quite a good one, which was Premier American Uranium and Nuclear Fuels coming to that acquisition. I think that makes a lot of sense, because what you've got is going to pure play exploration company in North America. It needs it. So
Well, in the U.S., in Wyoming, I mean, it's putting
yeah,
together some pretty interesting assets again.
yeah, I like
As,
this one.
as a matter of fact, it's reassembling all the Uranium One assets, exploration assets,
Yeah,
right? Which Bill Sheriff was involved with the Uranium One prior to the sale to Rosatom. So it is rather interesting. I mean, and now, depending on if you're purely looking at it from the perspective of nuclear fuels, or from Premier American, and you're really not watching what else is going on or the history of this stuff, you may not know how to take it all, because I don't think the market's necessarily applauded the transaction. But if you know that Bill Sheriff is the chairman of all three, and that Premier and Nuclear were kind of rollouts or supported by Encore Energy, and I think in this case they've put together they've kind of created an exploration incubator for Encore, because there's some also parts of these assets that are there's a buyback on the nuclear fuels asset. There's an ability there to let Encore actually support that incubator, if you will, that exploration asset, and it's put those Uranium One assets all back together again.
Yep.
So I think it's interesting from that perspective.
No, I like it. I like it. And I guess the other two things to note there. One is cash. They, I think Nico Fields had a bunch of cash in about 7 million, something like that, 6, 7 million. That
Yeah.
is super, super helpful.
Well, and you've seen that before as well, right? You remember when fission uranium rolled out or spun out fission 3.0 or F3, which is now F4 or whatever. But for a number of years, fission uranium was then able to support financially, the activities of that exploration company on a go-forward basis. And I think NextGen spun out IsoEnergy originally. And again, if you look at a lot of their early financings, you'll see that NextGen was heavily involved in a lot of that and supporting them and getting them out. So being able to isolate those exploration assets like that and support them financially is not something that's new to us, new to the market, but it's tended to work in the past.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing for me will be see if there's more roll-up opportunities. There are, is the answer. But what these guys do about it, like Colin, finance guy, ex analyst. I don't know if necessarily he's a pure play M&A guy, but everyone associated with all three companies is very comfortable around M&A and how much more will come. Because what I see is like these are good assets. This is a good merger. This makes sense. I can see them going on from here, like creating value from here. Whereas when we're saying talking about Nexus and Basin, I'm like, no, that's the active,
No,
like two desperate people, right?
Yep.
And by the way, do contact me and tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm so far I think we're quite good at sort of knowing what good looks like and what not so good looks like, but a bit arrogant and aggressive of me. But there we go. And talking of which, you've got to make a call on Stephen Stewart's baseload merging with Forum. Again, I like James Sykes, but obviously I think he's going to sort of take a back seat, and it'll be interesting to see whether he stays involved permanently or not. Because I think some would argue that he, it started strong and then got weaker and weaker because you got to make those discoveries, and easier said than done. I get it, but the market is unforgiving in that way. And then obviously Forum, you've got a young woman there who seems very, very capable indeed. But what's she going to do different from what she was doing at Forum versus what James was doing at Baseload? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I mean, yeah, Forum was Rick Mazer for the longest time. Well, Rick was still there and is still there. I mean, he's one of the old guard. He was one of the last men standing from the last go round as well. And I think Forum always had a history of absolutely positively was more focused on finding something than playing games with the market.
Yeah.
But I think Forum's asset now is primarily, I mean, because they've really run kind of dry on the basin stuff. Their real asset seems to be up in Nunavut, and where they've actually got something that they can grow with, and if that's the game you want to play up there. Now, recently, I think Rebecca Hunter took Rick's place at Forum as CEO. But she's kind of a James Sykes. She's a very talented geologist, exploration geologist, and I think she got her PhD studying that deposit they're working on up in Nunavut. So
the Thelon Basin.
The Thelon Basin. So so it comes back to conversations we've had about managing these companies, where you've got geologists running public companies, which isn't always a bad thing, but it isn't always a good thing. It depends on where their talents are and where their where their real strengths are. So this one will be interesting because now she's got both. Now they're also, I mean, they're putting one of the things that Baseload came to the table with was cash in the bank, and I know that the workup in the north was very expensive and continues to be very expensive, and it's been difficult, as I mentioned, for the juniors to raise money in the last little while. But they seem to be taking that money and earmarking it for the basin, for some of Baseload's projects there. and doing a lot of drilling, which raises other questions. But yeah, it's I'm not sure how that one's gonna pan out. But again, they I guess they decided or determined that they need to do something to to revigorate themselves in the market. The forum story wasn't working. The baseload story was getting a little long in the tooth as well. And this looked like a way of creating something new at a time, maybe when this is the right time to do it, if the markets truly are picking up. But we've said that 8 times in the last 3 years.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Well, interesting one because my face has gone fuzzy, my camera's gone weird, and I don't know how to fix it, folks. So I'm afraid we're gonna have to suck this one up. Plus, it's probably no bad thing. The best way to view me is fuzzy from a distance. Yeah, there's obviously going to be more to come, right? It's obvious, and we've been talking about it for a couple of years that it's gonna take this. So there's a trend of spinning things out because we've got too much on the plate and having to raise capital and drive interest, but the market has been, I guess, unforgiving in that sense. Again, North America kind of seems to be heading towards Wyoming, Utah. I think New Mexico is going to be the new one for me. I think later this year, I think we expect to see a slew of New Mexico stories as well. Because I think, obviously, and I think the one sort of downside on New Mexico stories is obviously kind of First Nation type resistance, or certain local resistance, shall we say, that needs to be managed, needs to be sensitive to education around that, and if they can get that right and get that buy-in, I think there's going to be some big projects coming to market out of that.
Well, to the extent that there are big projects down there to come to market, I think. But I do think
there's
that
there's a couple of private ones which we are aware of and involved with, and I think that people will be surprised.
No, well, it shouldn't be a surprise, because I think anything going on in the U.S. right now is going to get significant support. Right, the U.S. needs uranium. They need fuel. They need surety supply. They need to increase their domestic supply drastically, I think, and so there's a lot of support all over the place for that kind of thing. So that's good to see these projects.
You know what's good to see? Do you know what's good to see? Mm-hmm. Cameco's share price starting to motor. Motor.
Yes.
Motor.
Yeah. Well, these are all the clues, and again, we keep falling back on the fact that we're dealing in an opaque market here. But these are the things that we've been watching for, right? The Sprott move, the Cameco move, Bannerman. I mean, these are, now you're seeing what the people who are in the know, how they're reacting. So, and we know they know more than we do. So that's you tend to want to follow their lead.
Yep. What about you guys? How are you getting on with your stuff over at Pure Point?
Really good.
Yeah?
We've been we were focused right now on our Dorado project. It's our 50-50 joint venture with ISO.
Yeah.
And what happened when we did put those together was we were able now to identify there's just a slew of targets that were never followed up on historically, because they were fractured, they were all over the place, and we're systematically going through them, and we'll probably have some results out very, very shortly. But we've been very, very happy with what we're seeing so far, and it's the relationship with ISO has been great for us, because we know that we've got a lot of runway to look properly and to test these things properly and to follow up on things, without having to do a whole bunch of dilutive market raises. We did raise some money recently. It is tough. It's tougher this last year to raise money than it was historically. But we've been able to be rather focused, raising only what we need when we need it, because we've got partners to fall back on, and that's been helpful.
And what do you think? Like, and listen, I've got so tired of talking about the macro story, and I think people tired of listening to it as well. We've published so much information on, our written content on that front is like library, and people are kind of bored of that. I'm trying to work out, because what I thought is interesting, you always look for parallels and verticals, don't you? Like, gold's obviously been on a tear, beginning at the beginning of 2024 is at maybe $2,000 now. We are, say $3,500. Price secures all for sure. But then people are quite good at getting that stuff out of the ground because lots of people are trying to do it. Here we've got a scenario with uranium where people are trying to manifest a higher uranium price because that could do what it's done in the gold space, is obviously drive the stock up of various companies. But the companies that have had their stock driven up are the ones who are producing or are near-term producers, right? They can show a path to production with cash is and showing that cash is available. Uranium, if it is to imitate, it's going to have some of those factors working for them too, because the price discovery thing is a long time coming. But even then, there's not too many people demonstrating the ability to supply, to be able to get into production, to be able to deliver. And if they can, it's a long ways away. So, where do you, I mean, without going to the macro, we've got so much demand coming out here that goose step over here. I'll see you next week.
Adios.
Bye.